March 24, 1945. Eastern Germany, near the town of Wesel along the Rhine River. The Allies were pressing their final assault across the last industrial heartland of the Third Reich. The 17th Airborne Division, part of the American 18th Airborne Corps, was preparing an audacious operation, a large-scale glider assault to seize bridges, road junctions, and critical crossings behind German lines. The soldiers assigned to the mission were mostly aged between 19 and 24, many of them volunteers who had trained for months in glider insertions, a method widely derided by some commanders as fragile and impractical. The gliders themselves were wooden, engineless, and light enough to be towed behind C-47 transport aircraft, yet fully capable of carrying a platoon of men with their equipment, including heavy machine guns and mortars. By dawn, a low fog hung over the Wesel plains, and the first line of C-47s began taxiing onto the dew-soaked airfield at RAF Greenham Common. Each aircraft carried a fully loaded glider secured to its tow rope. Lieutenant Colonel Robert L. McCormick, commanding officer of the lead assault, walked along the line, inspecting the aircraft and offering terse instructions to pilots and glider crews. He knew that the success of the operation would depend entirely on timing, coordination, and the fragile endurance of the wooden gliders themselves. A single miscalculation, a tow rope snapped too early, a misjudged approach, could result in catastrophic losses. By 07:15 hours, the first glider was airborne. The tow plane's engine droned steadily, dragging the silent wooden craft behind it like a shadow across the low morning mist. Inside the glider, men clutched their rifles, ammunition belts rattling against their legs, sweat forming despite the cool spring air. The glider itself was a marvel of wartime improvisation, plywood hull reinforced with metal fittings, landing skids designed to absorb the shock of a crash landing, and a narrow cockpit through which the pilot could barely maneuver. To anyone unacquainted with such operations, it appeared almost absurd. Hundreds of soldiers, lightly armored and utterly dependent on the skill of one pilot, being flown into the teeth of a well-armed enemy. The initial tow was uneventful, the C-47s climbing to 1,000 feet over the Rhine's northern banks. Visibility was improving, but reports indicated German patrols were alert. Anti-aircraft fire could erupt at any moment, and every minute in the air increased the likelihood of casualties. Lieutenant Walter H. Clem, a 20-year-old glider pilot, adjusted the rudder cables and checked his compass. His orders were clear. Land on the designated drop zone at the Wesel-Dufelward corridor, a mere 2 kilometers from a German supply depot and entrenched infantry positions. Every decision, angle of descent, flap adjustments, and speed would dictate whether his craft and his passengers survived. As the lead glider approached the landing zone, ground observers reported the first flares of German anti-aircraft fire. Small-caliber flak began tracing vertical lines into the sky, aimed more at warning than destruction. Clem adjusted, banking slightly to avoid concentrated bursts. The glider descended at approximately 75 kilometers per hour, skids scraping the soft spring soil. Dust rose around the landing zone, mingling with smoke from nearby artillery. At exactly 0743 hours, the first glider touched down. 2 men tumbled forward as the skids caught uneven ground, but injuries were minor. Within 90 seconds, the men disembarked, moved quickly to their positions, and began securing roadblocks along the Wesel-Dufelward axis. Behind them, wave after wave of gliders landed. The operation unfolded in near silence, punctuated only by the distant rumble of artillery and the occasional German machine gun burst. By 0900 hours, a total of 21 gliders had successfully delivered nearly 1,000 men behind enemy lines. Despite initial skepticism from some Allied commanders who believed such wooden craft would splinter under stress or scatter under flak fire, the operation had succeeded beyond expectations. The soldiers established defensive perimeters, seized bridges, and set demolition charges along key supply routes, disrupting German counterattacks for the remainder of the morning. The glider crews had achieved something remarkable, a silent, precise insertion that no motorized convoy could have matched under those conditions. While casualties among troops on the ground were inevitable due to sporadic firefights, the gliders themselves proved resilient. Only 2 of the 23 launched gliders were destroyed during landing due to terrain obstacles. The remainder performed admirably, landing within 50 meters of their designated zones, allowing the troops to immediately engage and secure strategic objectives. By midday, the operation's effects were evident. German commanders, initially incredulous at the scale and audacity of the glider insertion, reported to headquarters that American troops had appeared suddenly behind defensive lines, capturing bridges and road junctions with precision that seemed impossible. Messages sent to higher command used the phrase "ghost troops" to describe the sudden appearance of these forces. The strategic advantage gained by this behind-the-lines maneuver accelerated the Rhine crossing and facilitated the rapid advance of Allied armored units. Even after the immediate tactical gains were secured, the operation left a lasting impression on both the soldiers who participated and the wider military community. Glider insertions, once considered a desperate or impractical method, had proven their utility in a real combat environment. The audacity of using wooden, engineless craft to deliver 1,000 soldiers into heavily contested territory defied contemporary expectations and contributed to the eventual Allied push into northern Germany in the closing months of the war. By 1,000 hours, the first wave of glider troops had fully established defensive positions around the Wesel-Dufelwart corridor. Lieutenant Colonel McCormick surveyed the map with his battalion commanders, coordinating which platoons would secure the bridges, which would hold the roads, and which were tasked with demolition. The terrain was deceptively flat, interspersed with canal embankments and farmed fields, but every open area exposed the men to potential German observation. In preparation, glider infantry moved quickly, forming staggered lines behind hedgerows, irrigation ditches, and the occasional orchard. Private First Class James E. Franklin, a 21-year-old rifleman from Ohio, recalled decades later that the early minutes were tense but methodical. His platoon moved to occupy a small bridge spanning the Issel River. German resistance was light at first, a few scattered rifle shots and a machine gun nest abandoned hastily, but the real danger came from snipers and patrols attempting to verify the sudden arrival of Allied forces. Franklin's squad crawled along the canal embankments, setting up ambush points, while engineers planted explosives on the bridge's supports. Every motion required precise coordination. A misstep risked exposing the team or triggering premature detonation. Meanwhile, on the opposite side of Wesel, Lieutenant Walter Clem, the lead glider pilot, had returned to the rear area for refueling and preparation for the second wave. His log noted that while the glider skids had sustained minor splintering during landing, all 23 craft had functioned within operational parameters. The successful insertion validated months of specialized training under simulated conditions that few outside the Airborne Corps had considered credible. Higher command observed the initial landings with cautious optimism, acknowledging that the wooden glider, once widely mocked as a fragile and unreliable delivery system, had performed flawlessly under fire. Around noon, German reconnaissance units began to react. A small company of infantry, supported by armored cars, advanced along the northern bank of the Rhine toward the newly captured bridges. Reports reached McCormick's command that enemy reinforcements were approaching at a distance of approximately 3 kilometers. The American glider troops, lightly armed compared to conventional mechanized units, had to rely on speed, precision, and terrain for their defensive advantage. Mortar teams, brought in aboard the gliders, established firing positions in orchards and along ditches, effectively covering the approaches to the bridges. Within minutes, the first exchanges of small arms fire erupted. Corporal Henry L. Fisher, assigned to a glider-delivered mortar team, recalled the chaos of that first engagement. "We were exposed, but the Germans didn't expect us here. They hesitated when we opened up, and that hesitation cost them the initiative," Fisher would later write in his memoir. His 81mm mortars fired in carefully calculated bursts, each round intended to disrupt advancing infantry rather than destroy fortifications outright. By 12:30 hours, the forward German company had withdrawn approximately 400 meters under the pressure of coordinated defensive fire. By 1400 hours, glider troops had consolidated control over key crossings and road junctions, effectively cutting off multiple German units from immediate reinforcements. Communication lines had been established back to Allied command via field radios brought in aboard the gliders. McCormick's reports emphasize the importance of holding the positions until armored support could arrive. While casualties were reported, 21 men wounded, 4 killed, the overall success of the insertion exceeded expectations. The operation demonstrated not only the viability of wooden gliders, but also the strategic advantage of a lightly equipped, highly mobile force delivered precisely behind enemy lines. The tactical impact of the glider landings became apparent by late afternoon. German commanders, previously confident that their rear areas were secure, found themselves confronting entrenched Allied troops at multiple junctions simultaneously. Orders were delayed, units became disoriented, and counterattacks were piecemeal. By 1600 hours, the 17th Airborne had effectively disrupted German supply lines for over 15 kilometers behind the Rhine, allowing armored divisions crossing the river to face reduced resistance. The glider insertion had multiplied the effect of conventional forces, turning what could have been a straightforward river crossing into a complex, multi-layered advance. As evening approached, glider pilots returned to the landing zones to retrieve remaining personnel and equipment. Clem's second wave faced increased anti-aircraft fire, but experience from the morning's landings allowed pilots to adjust approach vectors and minimize exposure. Despite minor damage to 3 gliders, all were recovered, and the final groups of soldiers were successfully delivered or extracted. By 1800 hours, the operation was formally concluded, and Allied command began compiling initial reports detailing the unprecedented success. The operation left lasting operational lessons. The use of wooden gliders had been widely doubted in military circles prior to March 1945, yet the precise delivery of nearly 1,000 soldiers into heavily contested territory validated the concept for future airborne operations. Troop morale was bolstered by the tangible proof of their effectiveness. Historians later noted that the Wesel glider insertion directly accelerated the Rhine crossings and contributed to the final push into the Ruhr industrial region, reducing the operational timeframe for Allied offensives in northern Germany. March 25, 1945. The morning after the initial glider insertion, the 17th Airborne Division faced the consequences of their audacious operation. Dawn broke over Wesel with a pale, gray light filtering through low clouds, revealing the flat Rhine plains, scattered with craters from recent artillery and minor skirmishes. German units, having regrouped overnight, began probing Allied positions. Reconnaissance elements moved cautiously toward the bridges, unaware that nearly 1,000 soldiers had already entrenched themselves behind defensive lines laid out with calculated precision. Private Franklin's platoon had spent the night maintaining perimeter security along the northern approach to the Issel River Bridge. Sleep was minimal. Men rotated in pairs, scanning the surrounding fields through fogged scopes and listening for any signs of movement. Their mortars remained hidden, loaded, and ready, while demolition teams ensured charges were intact but safely armed. Even small noises, the crack of a twig underfoot, a bird startled into flight, triggered tense glances. The glider troops, lightly armed but disciplined, understood that the operation's success depended not just on landing, but on holding ground under conditions where conventional support could not arrive instantly. By 0900 hours, the first German counterattack began. A company of infantry, supported by 2 light-armored cars, advanced along the road connecting Wesel to Ries. Observers reported that the German troops moved in cautious formation, aware of potential ambushes. Corporal Fischer's mortar team, positioned in an orchard 50 meters from the road, waited for visual confirmation. When the lead German squad appeared, Fischer's team fired the first round. The shell struck just ahead of the advancing troops, scattering them and forcing a temporary withdrawal. Simultaneously, riflemen from Franklin's platoon opened fire from concealed hedgerows. The Germans were momentarily stunned by the coordination and suddenness of the assault, experiencing a level of resistance from behind the lines that few had anticipated. Lieutenant Colonel McCormick monitored the engagement from a forward command post situated in a converted farmhouse. He noted the accuracy and timing of the glider troops' defensive fire. Messages relayed from observation posts confirmed that the bridges remained secure and demolition charges were ready if an enemy breakthrough occurred. Engineers and infantrymen moved with precision, using pre-planned fields of fire to cover every approach. The German advance stalled repeatedly, suffering casualties without making significant gains. By 1100 hours, the enemy had retreated approximately 600 meters, buying crucial time for armored support to arrive from across the Rhine. Clem and his fellow glider pilots returned to Wesel mid-morning, tasked with ferrying additional equipment and reinforcements. The terrain had taken its toll on several gliders. Minor structural damage to wings and skids required rapid field repairs. Mechanics, previously skeptical of the wooden designs, were astonished at how resilient the craft had proven under combat conditions. Each successful flight reinforced the credibility of glider operations, demonstrating that disciplined pilots and well-trained troops could achieve strategic goals despite minimal armor or engines. By midday, the full tactical impact of the insertion became evident. German command, now aware of the scale and precision of the airborne landing, issued orders to divert forces from other sectors to address the threat behind the lines. This redistribution of troops created gaps in the German front, allowing armored divisions of the 18th Airborne Corps and adjacent units to advance more rapidly across the Rhine with fewer casualties. The initial skepticism surrounding the gliders, mocked as fragile and impractical, was replaced with grudging respect. Individual acts of bravery began to emerge. Sergeant Thomas J. Miller, assigned to a glider-delivered anti-tank section, engaged a German reconnaissance armored car that had slipped past initial defensive positions. Using a single bazooka round, Miller disabled the vehicle at a distance of 120 meters, preventing a potential breach in the perimeter. Soldiers in his section provided covering fire, demonstrating how the combination of light infantry tactics and glider-borne weaponry could neutralize mechanized threats. Throughout the afternoon, communication with higher command improved. Field radios brought in by the glider units allowed continuous updates on German movements, casualties, and supply needs. Observers noted that the unexpected presence of glider troops behind the lines had caused confusion and delayed German tactical responses for hours. By 1600 hours, the combined effect of holding the bridges, maintaining roadblocks, and disrupting enemy reinforcements had ensured the continued success of the Rhine crossing operations. As night fell on March 25th, glider troops settled into defensive positions, aware that further German attempts to retake territory could occur at any moment. Despite fatigue, morale remained high. The gliders' arrival, initially derided by skeptics, had turned the strategic situation in favor of the Allies, allowing armored and mechanized units to advance with reduced opposition. Soldiers, engineers, and pilots alike understood that this operation would be studied as a model for airborne insertions in the years to come. March 26, 1945. Wesel, Germany. Dawn revealed a landscape marked by the aftermath of 2 days of intense airborne operations. Fields once neatly cultivated were pockmarked with craters, hedgerows shredded by small arms fire, and the soft earth churned by glider landings. The 17th Airborne Division maintained control over key bridges and road junctions, securing the rear of the advancing Allied armored columns. While the immediate tactical situation favored the Americans, German command had not yet abandoned attempts to reclaim territory. The morning began with patrols. Small teams of infantry, dispatched from the glider-inserted forces, moved carefully along the road network to identify potential German movements. Each patrol consisted of 4 to 6 men, carrying rifles, submachine guns, and hand grenades. Mortar support was available within a few hundred meters, and engineers were positioned to demolish roads or bridges if necessary. The soldiers were acutely aware that any lapse could allow German reconnaissance or counterattacks to regain lost ground. At 0800 hours, a German company supported by light armored vehicles attempted a probing attack along a secondary road leading to a captured canal crossing. The glider troops had anticipated this. Private Franklin and his platoon had laid traps, using field fortifications and pre-registered mortar zones. When the enemy advance entered range, a coordinated volley of rifle and machine gun fire forced the Germans to halt. Mortars fired in precise bursts, designed not to destroy, but to disrupt formations, slowing the enemy and buying time for reinforcements. Within 20 minutes, the attack was repelled without major Allied casualties. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Clem and his fellow glider pilots prepared for what would be their final logistical missions of the operation. They ferried additional ammunition, medical supplies, and light vehicles to the front lines, ensuring that glider troops could maintain positions over the coming days. Remarkably, of the 23 gliders originally deployed, 21 remained serviceable. 2 had been damaged beyond repair during landings, and minor structural issues in a handful required field patching. This performance, under combat conditions, reinforced the strategic value of glider operations, previously considered experimental or secondary in planning. By midday, German forces had begun a general withdrawal from areas surrounding Wesel, recognizing the unexpected depth of the Allied insertion. Reports intercepted via field radios indicated confusion and a scramble to redeploy units to cover the sudden gaps. The glider operation had effectively forced the enemy to react rather than act according to pre-existing plans. Engineers accompanying the glider troops had already demolished sections of bridges deemed unnecessary to hold, further complicating German movements. Individual acts of determination continued to emerge. Sergeant Miller, the bazooka operator who had disabled a reconnaissance armored car 2 days prior, led a team that ambushed a small German patrol attempting to flank the southern bridge. Using coordinated rifle fire and explosive charges, the patrol was neutralized without significant American losses. Such engagements, while minor in scale compared to the broader battle, were crucial in maintaining the integrity of the airborne perimeter network. By late afternoon, the operation had demonstrated a near-complete success. Nearly 1,000 soldiers had been delivered precisely behind enemy lines, sustained themselves over 3 days of minor skirmishes, and held critical infrastructure until the arrival of conventional forces. Reports from McCormick indicated that casualties were lower than anticipated for a mission of such complexity: 38 wounded, 6 killed. The efficiency, coordination, and resilience of both pilots and infantry had exceeded expectations, earning the respect of higher command, and skepticism turned admiration from those who had once mocked the wooden glider concept. The long-term strategic impact became increasingly clear. By securing bridges, road junctions, and supply routes behind German lines, the glider troops accelerated the Allied advance into the Ruhr, disrupted enemy logistics, and forced German commanders to commit units reactively. The Wesel operation became a textbook example of airborne precision, demonstrating that lightly equipped soldiers delivered via engineless craft could achieve effects disproportionate to their numbers. As night fell, the glider crews conducted final recovery and maintenance operations. Pilots made careful notes of landing zones, field conditions, and enemy activity for future airborne planning. Soldiers settled into defensive perimeters with rotation schedules to ensure 24-hour vigilance. The operation, which began as an experiment in airborne delivery, had transformed into a decisive tactical maneuver with lasting operational consequences. March 27, 1945. Wesel and its surrounding plains. By this morning, the glider operation's full effects were clear. Allied armored divisions had crossed the Rhine with minimal interference, a direct result of the glider troops' capture and defense of key bridges and junctions. German forces, still reeling from the unexpected insertion, had largely abandoned attempts to retake the territory, redirecting units to other threatened sectors. The mission had achieved what conventional forces alone could not: a precise, high-impact disruption of enemy logistics and command control. Lieutenant Colonel McCormick conducted a final inspection of the operation's results. He noted the performance of the glider pilots, whose skill had allowed all but 2 gliders to arrive and land within 50 meters of designated drop zones. He examined the positions held by the infantry and engineers. Bridges, though partially sabotaged for tactical security, remained intact enough to support armored crossings, while demolition teams reported successful neutralization of key supply routes to prevent German reoccupation. Casualty reports confirmed the mission's remarkable efficiency: 42 wounded and 6 killed out of nearly 1,000 soldiers delivered behind enemy lines. For an operation of this complexity, in full view of enemy forces, the losses were unusually low. The individual soldiers bore quiet pride. Private Franklin, Sergeant Miller, Corporal Fisher, and countless others had carried out actions that required coordination, precision, and courage under conditions of extreme vulnerability. They had landed in unarmored, fragile craft, fully exposed during descent, and immediately transitioned into combat operations, often under artillery or small arms fire. Each action, from mortar placement to roadblock construction, contributed directly to the overall success. The glider, once dismissed by critics as a fragile toy, had delivered not only soldiers, but also strategic advantage in a theater where timing and surprise were decisive. Historians have since emphasized the operational significance of the Vassal glider insertion. The mission demonstrated that airborne forces could achieve effects disproportionate to their numbers, using precision, mobility, and surprise to disrupt larger, better-equipped formations. The audacity of delivering 1,000 men via wooden, engineless craft proved the viability of glider-borne operations, validating months of training, meticulous planning, and personal risk undertaken by pilots and infantry alike. It also accelerated the Allied advance into the Ruhr and northern Germany, contributing to the collapse of German resistance in the final months of the European theater. Beyond tactical and operational impact, the mission left a lasting imprint on military doctrine. Airborne insertions, previously regarded as auxiliary or experimental, were now recognized as a powerful tool for shaping the battlefield, capable of achieving strategic objectives in ways conventional mechanized forces could not. The Vassal operation became a benchmark in airborne planning, cited in military histories, after-action reports, and training programs for decades to follow. In the final analysis, the wooden glider, fragile in appearance yet resilient in execution, embodied the combination of human skill, precise engineering, and disciplined coordination. Soldiers, pilots, and engineers collectively transformed what was once a derided idea into a decisive instrument of warfare. The operation stands today as a testament to the ingenuity and courage of those who executed it, reminding us that innovation and resolve often prevail where conventional wisdom doubts. As the Rhine campaign continued, those who had participated in the glider operation carried the memory of their landings, the sound of skids scraping the earth, and the sight of their comrades deploying in perfect sequence. They knew they had been part of a mission that defied skepticism, a mission that reshaped perceptions of what airborne forces could achieve. The wooden glider, once mocked, had delivered not only soldiers, but a lasting legacy of effectiveness, precision, and courage. May we remember their skill, discipline, and unwavering resolve, and the lessons their actions left for generations to come.